What's up, fellas? Welcome to a brand new episode of The Sports Student. My name is Wendell Epps, aka The Sports Student. In today's podcast, I'll be interviewing Nashville Predators reporter Kara Hammer. In this podcast, Kara will share her experiences working with the Predators, where she got started in the sports media industry, and will also share some tips and tricks on how to succeed in the sports media industry as a whole. So sit back, relax, enjoy the podcast, and without further ado, this is a Sports Student interview with Kara Hammer. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Sports Student. My name is Wendell Epps, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Kara Hammer. Kara, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. How are you doing, and how's your summer been going?
You know, it's been really great. It's been kind of a crazy year with hockey season, and we were kind of still in this like bubble and COVID and all of that stuff happening. And so right now I'm just kind of preparing for the expansion draft that's happening with Seattle. We just traded away some big name players, and our number one goalie, who's been with the team since I started, just retired. So I'm kind of having this like bittersweet summer where I'm excited to come back to work and meet the new players, but I'm also kind of disappointed that some of the guys that I have covered for years are now moving on and going different places. But other than that, summer has been really good, and I'm so excited to be joining you here on your podcast.
Hey, I'm excited to have you. I mean, you've done some really incredible things in the sports media industry. So can you go ahead and quickly give the audience a little background of where you started in the sports media industry, what got you into sports media, and where you are today?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Wyoming, and that's where I graduated from. And so I got into this role because I always wanted to be a sports broadcaster. You know, when you're growing up in middle school and high school, they have you write out, what do you want to be? And I always knew that this was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be in front of the TV. I wanted to work in sports. And so when I was in college, I took an internship at the local TV station called KGWN in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I interned there for 2 years. And then when I graduated, they actually hired me. But the stipulation was my first year, I was a news reporter. And that was the only way that they said I could ever get into sports, is I had to do a year in news, because everybody was kind of on a 2-year contract. And I was in the 1 year waiting for the next sports guy to leave. So I did news for a year, and it was a very valuable lesson for me. I mean, I learned a ton about reporting. I was an MMJ. I lugged my own camera. I did all my own interviews. I mean, I grinded from the very start. And then the second year I did sports, and I just kind of, grew from there. I had different opportunities, and I moved to Arizona, and then I landed in Nashville, and I worked at the local station in Nashville, and I covered the Nashville Predators on their Stanley Cup run, and I networked myself into them bringing me on as their ringside reporter, and now I'm heading into my 5th season covering the team.
That's fantastic to hear. An incredible story. I have to ask, I mean, going from Wyoming to Nashville, like that's quite a move. How was that for you?
I always joke with people that I think I'm the only reporter in the National Hockey League that branded cattle in the summer and knew more about rodeo in my first job than I ever did about hockey. So, it was definitely a huge change. And, in Wyoming, we have no professional sports teams. So, thankfully, when I started there, I covered a lot. I went there with the sole thing that I was going to cover the Tennessee Titans. I was going to do football. I was going to do basketball. And then all of a sudden I started hockey. And I mean, I grew up a hockey fan. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. So I grew up with the Avalanche, and the team moved here and they won the Stanley Cup. And it was a really exciting time in my childhood. So I took a lot of that when I got to Nashville and, grew from there. And, I don't know. It's just it's a crazy thing, but I always tell people you can start anywhere. So all these kids that start in South Dakota and North Dakota and Minnesota and all these crazy places you have to go, I think as long as you really want it, you can get to wherever you want to be.
Yeah, for sure. And I honestly think that's just like something that's really cool. I mean, that's something that definitely intrigues me as a college student, like, not knowing where I'm going to go. Like I could be in any state in any time in the near future. So that's like just really cool. And I'm also glad, like you mentioned, like, you're doing hockey right now, and hockey, obviously a great sport. And I know some people, they kind of have the misconception, they head into sports media thinking, oh, I just want to do basketball or football, but there's just like so many great sports out there. And hockey is one of those other alternative sports besides basketball and football that is, just as fun. And there's just so much to learn about.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I would say when I started out, I always thought it would be football, and I have this huge love for college basketball. But the best thing about it now is working in hockey is I get to be a fan of the hockey team, but I really get to be a fan of college basketball because I don't cover them. So I can still now go to the games. I can be that psycho in the stands that's cheering and going crazy and all of that. But then I still get to go to work, and do a job I love. And I think it's when you're in sports, there's so many different avenues to take. And there's so many opportunities too, even if you want to be in front of the camera. It's crazy now, all these teams have social media and all of these opportunities. I mean, when I was starting out, thinking about working for a team didn't really exist. We didn't have a camera person at the University of Wyoming that was running social media, or a TV station. And then now so many colleges have that. I mean, look at you have this podcast. It's incredible. I love the way it's growing, sports media and sports, and all these opportunities for people.
And Kara, I think you just read my mind there, because what you just said there was actually going to be my next question, asking you about how the sports media industry has changed over time. And you just provided a perfect summary there. But I want to get your thoughts on one of the more important aspects now of sports media, which is social media, and how it seems to be taking over the industry day by day. For you, what are your thoughts on social media and the effect it's had on the sports media industry?
I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I think I told you earlier I was taking a little
Yeah.
break from it because sometimes you just have to walk away. Um, I love things. I love Twitter. I mean, information just comes out so fast, and you can follow so many different people, and that there's humor and stuff. But then you have a little bit of that negativity of the Twitter trolls, I call them, or the keyboard warriors. So I think I feel like it's great. It's great for sports and highlights and everything you want. And I think you just kind of have to get rid of maybe some of that negativity, but I am all for it. I mean, I don't do Instagram, I don't do Facebook, but I love Twitter. I mean, I'm there for the tweets.
All in for the tweets. I love that.
Yeah.
So, what you do now at working as a reporter for the Predators, can you take me through, if there is there like a normal day sort of when working as a reporter for them?
Yeah, definitely. So I work all of their home games. We have a broadcast team, so every morning we meet as a group. Things were a little different this year with COVID and kind of being in our little bubble. So I'll go back to years prior and give you a rundown of when we get to meet in person. But we meet at the rink and we go over our production and what we're going to talk about kind of during the game, a game flow. Obviously, the game is going to tell itself and have its own story, but we always have little tidbits on the side. Maybe a player is approaching a record, or he's going to break a record tonight. So things like that in the back of our mind. I tell my producer who I want to interview, and then we meet with the Preds PR staff to say this is who we want on our broadcast tonight. And then after that, the players have a morning skate usually, and then we interview the head coach. So we get a little bit of insight, and then I go home and eat lunch and kind of get ready, and then we come back to the rink, and I just hang out and get ready for the game to start and prepare. I prepare all of my questions. I write out all of my questions before I go. And I got into this thing where I'm very lucky that two of our broadcasters are former NHL players. And so a lot of times before I do an interview, I run through my questions with them because they were in their shoes. They were on the other side of the bench, skating up to do the interview. And I always say, hey, is this good? Is this bad? Because sometimes, we could be on a losing streak and you want to still be sensitive with what you're asking one of the players, or maybe I get a little too wordy or I expect them to say something. So I think that's a big thing for reporters is I always love to run ideas off of people and gain insight from the other people on my broadcast team.
I love that you mentioned that, because I definitely think collaboration is extremely important. And,
Yeah.
Obviously in the sports media industry, you're more than likely going to be working, as a team with other people, and you just have so many great people to lean on. So kind of leads me into my next question. I want to ask you, like, when it comes for those questions, what advice would you give to college students who may be working on packages or feature stories, if they're trying to ask maybe some of those hard hitting questions? What are some things that you have found beneficial to kind of work around that and get those questions in an interview?
This is my number one piece of advice. And somebody said this to me years ago, and it was like this light bulb went off. And I always want to tell people, be prepared. Think about all the questions you have in your mind. But after you ask that first question, don't think about what your second question is going to be. Listen to the first answer, because sometimes your best question is going to come off of what they said. And it's such a thing of listening to what they're like, listen to what their answer is, and then take your second question off of that. I mean, I always go into every interview with 3 questions prepared, but sometimes I'll have an answer in the first thing and I'm like, oh, okay, let's ask that next. It just, it gives you the most insight into what they're thinking, and can build your story a little bit. And also, I feel like one of the biggest things when putting a package together, or if you have a sit down interview, is I always love to ask, do you have anything else? Because maybe you as a reporter missed something and the person you're covering has something they want to tell you. And I feel like that can just add so much into what your story and what you're trying to tell and put together.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all about, being a storyteller and being able
Yeah.
to ask those questions, form, a relationship. Especially for you, it's important because, you work for one team. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things where the greater trust you can gain from those players, it'll lead to the interviews being a lot more laid back sort of thing, and just like
Yeah,
it'll be more
definitely.
comfortable.
Definitely.
So taking you back in time, I want to know, because I'm always curious about this with people that get in the sports media industry. So you said you basically knew you wanted to get into the sports media industry at a young age. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
so I want to know what were some things that you did in high school? Did you play any sports? Did you do any
Oh.
like news? Did you any practice to get you ready for the industry? I know that's like at a young age, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I played softball growing
Okay,
up. That was
nice.
my whole life. I played in college, but in high school, I always knew I wanted to do it. I was just so into playing sports that the concept didn't really like click to me of how to do
Uh-huh.
this until I got to college and learned. But it's fascinating. So I worked for 4 years at Northern Arizona University in Fox Sports, Arizona, and there they had this college program where the kids could do NAU TV, and they could come and they could do this student TV station. And I was like, wow, I didn't have anything like that at Wyoming. I was the only kid that wanted to be a broadcaster. And so, it didn't hit me and how to get to this role until I was 20 or 21. So starting in high school, I think it's awesome now that kids have these TV stations and things you can do, because we definitely didn't have anything like that when I was 16 and 17 years old.
Yeah, for sure. It just shows you how much the industry has just changed over the years. And it just seems like not even with sports, but like everything, you just see like younger and younger people. You hear on
Yeah,
social media, oh, youngest person to do this, youngest person to do that. So it's just
yeah.
crazy how all of that kind of works. Do you remember though your first time working as a reporter, like the first story or interview you ever did?
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember my very first live hit. This is was like total like crazy. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna go live. There's no prompter. There's a camera. We're out here. What's happening? And it was at Cheyenne Frontier Days, which is a huge rodeo in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I was wearing a cowboy hat, and I was gonna talk about this guy who just got done with a saddle bronc ride. And so I still remember that was the first time I went live. And I was always so used to kind of like being in studio, and I was an intern. Everything I read off the prompter, and somebody was helping me write my scripts. And the next thing I know, they just put me out there. And now I'm like, I always think, well, I don't even know what I would do if I have to read off a prompter, because everything is so live and scripted. I'd probably be terrible at it now. So,
That's
yeah.
fantastic to hear. And I want to know, how were those rodeos? Like, how would you describe a rodeo to someone that may not know much about it? How would you describe
Oh my God.
it?
Big belt buckles and cowboy hats. I don't know. It's fun because it's such like a West Coast kind of
Yeah.
thing, Colorado, Wyoming, Washington, Oregon. There's a lot of rodeos. I don't know. When I was in college, a lot of the kids that went to the University of Wyoming, that was their livelihood. They rodeo, they ranch. So it was a huge culture shock. I grew up in Denver. I mean, I had never seen a person wear cowboy boots until I went to Wyoming. So I don't really know how I would describe it. It's a really fun time. Yeah, I feel like every person should go just once and just kind of see how it's a sport that most people don't think about.
Yeah.
It's still competition. It's still a huge sporting event, and it's fun. And there's concerts at night, so everybody should go at least once.
Okay. I've not been to rodeo before, but I think I definitely will now need to go to one for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But going back to the Predators, I want to know for this next season for the Predators, what are some of the most intriguing storylines that you're really excited to follow heading into next season?
Well, so as I mentioned, our number one goalie, Pecorine, he just retired.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had UC Soros. It's always kind of been that we always call them the two-headed monster, because you can never say there's a number one or a number two.
Mhm.
They've always kind of been our number one guy. And so now UC Soros is going to be, he was definitely kind of the number one guy last season, and now he's totally going to be the guy because Pekka's, going to go retire in Finland on his lake or whatever he does. So I'm excited to follow that. I'm excited to see Seattle in the expansion draft, that now we'll have a new team in the National Hockey League and how that's going to play out. And we traded a forward and one of our top four defensemen. So we'll have some younger guys coming in. So those are all things that I'm looking forward to. But mostly I'm excited to just get back to having people in the arena every day. And I did a whole season, and I have not seen a player of ours in person since the summer of 2020 when I ran into him at the airport. I didn't see a single player in person this last season.
Wow.
So I am very excited to see these guys up close and personal.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because sometimes, you see a player and you think, oh, he's really tall, and you meet him in person, you're like, oh, he's actually kind of short. So all these guys in my mind, they're so big and tall because I haven't seen them without their skates on. So
Yeah, it's funny how that works, and like just this whole past year has just been so different for everybody. But I want to know, what are some big things that maybe you learned or maybe helped enhance your skills as a reporter this past year with everything sort of being virtual and not in person?
I've learned you just have to go with the flow. I mean, things were crazy, and you just can't panic. I mean, we went through so many adjustments. We had some of our broadcasters go into COVID protocol where they were missing 2 weeks at a time. So we were doing kind of this bare bones broadcast. But I learned that, you just have to have fun. You have to keep a smile, and you have to remember that your job is to entertain the people at home, and your job, I think the biggest thing I learned is my job this past year was to bring what was happening at the arena to people at home, because we didn't have fans in the building when we started. So we had to bring all of that and all of that excitement and what we were feeling and what it was like to the viewers at home, so they could, kind of have this feeling of what it was like for us to be inside of this empty building. So I think that was the biggest thing I learned, was just this reminder of my job is to bring you exactly what's happening here to you at home. So
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely, I would say this past year too was like really just the ultimate test as like a reporter, just any position in the sports media industry, because there were just so many challenges. But I'm curious to know, what are some qualities, some big qualities that you think makes a good reporter? I know everyone has their sort of like their different reporting style, but just in your opinion, if you were to tell a college student, hey, these are some things that you should look out for and maybe make sure you have in your arsenal as a reporter, what would be some of those qualities?
So that's a really great question. Um, I think the biggest thing is to tell people what they don't know. I mean, everybody can go onto a box score and read the stat sheet, or you can see what a player is putting up. So I think it's always bringing something to the viewer that they don't know, finding that little side piece, that little side story. And, I will say, the first couple of years, I always did 3 questions. I did 5 interviews a game. It was always kind of the same thing. This year we had to change things up, and I had to find ways to fill that time. So I had to find stories. And I think that that's what makes a good reporter, is being able to step outside of your comfort zone and find something that other people don't know. I mean, it could be as simple as, hey, this person grew up here and they played against that player back in the day, or these two guys were high school friends when they grew up together in Europe, just small things like that that the person at home doesn't know. That's your job, is to kind of delve into that, find that information, and bring it to the viewer, because you're a sports fan. You know what the score is. You can read it. You can see what a player is doing. But I always think it's fascinating when you can find something other people don't know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it's important to make sure you just find those unique things, because especially with the internet now, you can find basically anything you want about like a player, but finding like those hard hitting fun facts, I think that definitely separates you from the rest of the competition.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love stories of where you're finding out how a player got there, or what makes them interesting. Our former goalie, Pekka, he became a goalie because he was the youngest of his cousins, and they used to make him be the goalie, and they would just shoot pucks at him like crazy. And I always think that's a fascinating story of that's what made him become this great goalie, because he was just kind of the kid that got bullied back home in Finland.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So it's just crazy how those things work, but when you're able to put it out there, it definitely makes you look really good. So
Yeah.
transitioning over to my next question here, I just want to know, because people will always like for college students, sports media majors, something that we always think about is knowing that, oh, we don't know where we're going to end up. We might have to make sacrifices. Work schedules in the industry can definitely be very grueling. I want to know for you, how have you been able to balance your work schedule while still also maintaining a personal and a social life?
Oh, wow. I guess, when I was younger, I was very like open and very free. Like I was going to go anywhere. And I think I grew up and when I was starting out, I feel like a lot of the people in my first year in the industry were kind of the same way. Everybody was willing to go places, but I'll admit it's not much of a social life. For 5 years, my days off were Wednesday and Thursday nights. And then you get into your later 20s and most people have career jobs where they work Monday through Friday. And you're like, hey, you want to go out on a Wednesday night? Or, especially I always give a lot of credit to people that work the morning show at a TV station because their hours are just crazy. But I think it's just, you have to find a balance. You have to find time and prioritize like what's important to you, because work is important, but you also have to have, some sanity and find some time. And I think the biggest thing when you're starting out is just be open. Like, don't be afraid to take a job if it's across the country. And don't be afraid if you have to take a job in news because it might lead to sports, or behind the camera because it might lead to a job on camera. I think it's so important when you're starting out is just be open and take anything that comes your way, because you never know where it's going to lead.
Yeah, most definitely. And is there anything that you wish you knew in college about sports media that maybe you didn't figure out till a little bit later?
I wish I thought that it paid a lot more money when I started out. I think that's one of the hardest things is, you just expect not, it's a kind of hopefully our industry will change one day, but I think starting out, it can be low paying and it can be frustrating, but if you could just make it through those first couple of years, I mean, you can work your way up and hopefully, find yourself in a better financial situation. But I think that was one of the toughest things. I also think I wish somebody would tell me how heavy those cameras were going to be, because I mean, I grinded, and I think a lot of people think I always want to tell people, like, when I got here, and I am just a reporter now, but when I started out, I mean, I did everything. And so just don't be afraid to carry the tripod and carry the camera and be sweaty and be gross, because you had to lug all of that equipment. Like it will pay off for you one day. So
That's very true. Hard work pays off, and having those variety of skills definitely helps a lot. So, Kara, I want to go ahead and end this interview here with a little bit of a rapid fire. So let's do it.
Okay.
All right. So if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Invisible.
Nice. Favorite sports movie?
Probably A League of Their Own.
Cool. What's one food you can't live without?
Pizza.
If you weren't working in the sports media industry, what would you be doing?
I think I always wanted to be like an esthetician or maybe a lawyer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
If you could describe your reporting style using just one word, what word would that be?
Gosh, I don't know. That is a really hard question. Have you asked this to other people? What kind of answers they give?
I have. I mean, they'll normally just say, I don't know, passionate, outgoing, energetic. I mean, based on this interview, I can think of at least 15 qualities. I
don't know, maybe nice or friendly.
Nice,
I don't know.
That's accurate. That's very accurate. Let's see. Your 3 favorite hobbies to do when you're not working as a reporter.
I love to go paddleboarding. I love hiking, and I love traveling.
Very cool. Is there any city that you haven't been to that you want to go visit at some point?
Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Austin. Yeah.
Nice. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Very cool. And what's one fun fact that a lot of people do not know about Kara Hammer?
Oh, wow. I would have said before my branding cattle, but I already threw it out there. Now I got to come up with something else. A fun fact. Let's see. Ooh, I have my gold award in Girl Scouts, which is the highest honor you can get as a Girl Scout. It's equivalent to getting an Eagle Award as a Boy Scout. So
that's fantastic. Love that fun fact. Love that.
Yeah.
All right, Kara. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the
Oh
podcast. It
my
was
gosh,
such a
thank you
pleasure
so
having
much.
you. So much fun, and you've done some incredible things in the industry. I'm just really proud of you, and I just can't wait to see what else you do in the sports media industry.
Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. You're going to go so far. I feel like I'm going to be a ringside reporter one day when you're play-by-playing somewhere.
Hey, I would love that. That would be really
I
cool.
hope so. Yep.
All right. Thanks again for coming on, Kara.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, fellas. So that was a sports student interview with Kara Hammer. Another big shout out to Kara for coming on the podcast today. She was such an incredible guest. Loved having her on. But that'll do it for today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in my next one. All right, y'all. Take care. Sports student signing out. Peace.